Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Concert Honesty Podcast. This is Josh Quillen. It is June 24th, 2026. I am rebooting my podcast. Same format, same logo, pretty much the same music. But I'm trying to take a different approach and talk to people that I've really admired, and just kind of pick their brain on life and what they've learned. And I thought the best first guest to reboot my podcast with was a good friend of So's, but a good friend of mine who I've been very fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with. And his name is Russell Hartenberger. He is one of the members of the original Steve Reich and Musicians Ensemble and a founding member of the Nexus Percussion Ensemble based in Canada. Russ and I talk about all things aging, life, mowers, owning property, which none of that you're going to hear about because that was just between him and me. But then he starts asking me questions, which I really appreciate in a guest. Russ is a endlessly curious person at age 82, and it was a real treat to get to talk to him. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Without further ado, Russ Hartenberger. Got all this to order. Russell Hartenberger, I really am grateful always to talk with you in any context, whether it be backstage or over Zoom or in person or whatever. And we have spoken a lot in the past about, drumming and music and whatever. And I want to read, I texted you the other day, and if you don't mind, I said, I was sort of joking about how old I was. And you said, "You're not old yet. You're still in the dugout. I'm on the on-deck circle taking practice swings." And right. It got me thinking just about, and I don't want to be insulting, but I really am curious to talk to folks who are of the age that you are. And how old are you exactly?
Well, I'll be 82 in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. And I've done 400 podcasts now, I think, between the drumming interviews and just the regular podcast that I was doing. And it's not that I'm tired of talking to younger people. It's just that I've found that I've gleaned things from my elders that I just can't glean from younger folks or myself. And so I kind of am curious just to learn a little bit more about you and sort of how you're doing, and ask you some sort of bigger life questions, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
You stay with cautious skepticism. Well, I know, a lot of folks in the percussion world I remember looking up to you when I was in school a lot, just because, and knowing who you were, and seeing posters of Nexus and being like, well, that's the goal, right? Is to do something like that. And I'm very fortunate to have gotten to basically follow in your footsteps. You guys blazed a path for us. But the thing that they don't tell you when you're in college looking at those posters is that all of those people on that poster were also 10 years old at one point. And I'm curious if you can just take me back, what was 10-year-old Russ Hartenberger like? And what were you doing? What were you thinking about? What was your status quo at 10 years old compared to now at 80 or almost 82?
Well, it was very simple. When I was a tiny kid, I wanted to be a fireman because my dad took me to a fire station once, and that was pretty neat. Uh-huh. And then I started playing Little League Baseball, and I wanted to be a second baseman. And then the turning point was when in the 6th grade, we were able to join the school band. Mm-hmm. So,
and where was this? Where were you living at the time?
Oh, okay. So I lived in Oklahoma City at this time. I grew up in a small town called Watauga, but I moved to Oklahoma City at age 7. So it was in my school in Oklahoma, on the outskirts of Oklahoma City, that grade 6 we could join the band, but we had to play a thing called a song flute, which is kind of like a plastic recorder, to see if we had any musical talent at all.
I love how that's the litmus test of whether or not you're going to be a professional musician. Is can you make a sound on this thing that's almost impossible to make a sound on?
So our band director, actually, he was a great band director. He was a graduate from Eastman School of Music and played trombone, but really a wonderful guy. But he grouped us into 3 groups of the recorder players. The A group got to pick an instrument. The B group maybe got to pick an instrument, and the C group did not get to pick an instrument. I was on the back row of the B.
Okay. All right.
Group. But somehow I think because he knew my sister was the chorus teacher at the school at the time. I had a sister who was 12 years older than me, and she was teaching choir at the school. So I think maybe because of that, he allowed me to pick an instrument. So one night, the local music store brought all the band instruments to our band room, and we wandered around and looked at them. And I was looking at the trumpets. I thought that would be fun. And this buddy of mine, Randy Cullors is his name. Randy came over to me and said, "Hey, Russell, there's a thing called a snare drum. Let's go look at that." I'd never heard those words before. So Randy and I went over and looked at the snare drum, and that looked pretty neat. And all you had to do was buy a practice pad for $5 and a $1 pair of sticks. So my parents were happy about that.
Yeah, the trumpet was way more expensive.
Yeah. So Randy and I decided on the snare drum. And do you want this whole?
Yeah.
This is the kind of story you want?
Yeah, absolutely. This is fascinating.
Okay, so we started playing the snare drum in the band, but just at the very beginning, while everybody else was learning to play B flat on their instruments, the band assistant director called us into the back office and showed us how to hold the snare drum sticks because of course, we didn't know anything. And the interesting thing is, this guy Corky McNeil, who was a baritone player, euphonium player, had a withered arm, so he only had use of one arm. And so he would show, I think it was his left arm that was withered. So he would take his right arm and show us the right hand position and then turn it over for traditional left hand, but with his right hand.
Yeah.
So that's how Randy and I both learned how to hold the sticks.
It's amazing.
And then after a short while in the band, our band director, Mr. Walker, saw that both Randy and I had a little bit of talent. And so he said, there's a local drum teacher in town, and we should take lessons with this guy. And his name was Alan Abel. So Alan Abel was his first job out of school and out of the Air Force was as principal percussionist in the Oklahoma City Symphony. So this was incredibly serendipitous. That this wonderful teacher happened to be in my hometown at just the right time. I was beginning to learn snare drum. So went to lessons, started taking lessons from Alan Abel. My first lessons were in his bedroom. He had, I think at that time he had 2 kids and maybe another one on the way or something like that. But so he made his house his bedroom into his teaching studio. Eventually he got another house with a garage with a teaching built in, made into a teaching studio. But anyway, I studied with Alan Abel, and that was, of course, the turning point in my musical life. Anyway,
well, what was it? What was it about studying with Alan that, or I should say, Mr. Abel, just to be? I only met him once, and it was at the University of Akron, and he was giving a clinic on orchestra excerpts, which I was terrified of as a student. And rightfully so. I was terrible at it, and but it was like the most amazing masterclass. I've never seen anybody play snare drum that way. To play the volume that he played also was like mind blowing to me. And he did a castanet. I don't know what the piece is, but he's like, so most people use just a pair of castanets, but I hold it like 4 mallets and I use 8 castanets. And he was just like, he was raging on these castanets in the same way that people in steel band were raging on drum set or whatever. And I was like, wait, you can do that with orchestra? That's okay, all right. Like, he was the first person who sort of cracked that open, that concept of like that playing is not much different. It's and anyway, sorry to interrupt, but
that's interesting.
What was it about his teaching that sort of like you were inspired by your dad because he was a fireman, you wanted to be a fireman because you thought that was rad, and it is rad, but like what was it that you saw in Mr. Abel that you were like, okay, was there one particular moment?
First of all, a couple of years ago, I went to his 90th birthday party, and I still call him Mr. Abel. I think all his students still call him Mr. Abel.
I will stick with Mr. Abel moving forward.
But he was, I don't know, he just had this natural sense of pedagogy. He just he studied with Haskell Harr,
Mm-hmm.
who you probably know from his snare drum book,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and maybe some other people. He was from Gary, Indiana, near
Mm-hmm.
Chicago. But he just he had a natural ability and enthusiasm for teaching. So the first thing he did was, well, the first, actually, not only the first, but everything he did with me, he played along with me.
Mm.
So when we played snare drum on a practice pad, I was on my practice pad and he was on his practice pad.
Mm.
He played everything, paradiddles, rolls, exercises, everything with me. So I was able to watch out of the, feel feel him next to me, watch his hands,
Mm-hmm.
hear his sound, which was really important. Even on the practice pad, I was just thinking the other day, I still remember the sound he got on a practice pad, which is different than
Yeah.
anything that I've ever heard anybody on a practice pad. There's a rubber, piece of rubber on a board.
Well, it's one of those things.
Uh,
I mean, I've noticed this when I joined So, and I think the first time I sat, I sat next to you guys playing drumming, and I
yeah,
remember the first bongo hit. I don't know if you're the one that starts the piece.
yeah,
Is
I
that right?
started. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I just remember thinking like a bomb had gone off. And there's just something that I think as a young student, there's no pill you can take. You just have to. There's a maturity and an awareness of what you're about to sound like before you make the sound. And there's a depth, and I can imagine
yeah,
with Mr. Abel, I almost did it again, with Mr. Abel on the practice pad, that there's just like he just knows what he's
yeah.
going to sound like before he makes the sound, and that's you
Well,
can't get that when you're in college,
yeah.
like that's when you're 10.
Well, you're even saying you noticed that at his master class on
Yeah,
castanets. It's the
yeah,
same kind of thing. So once you have that concept of the sound in your head
hmm
and your ears, and you know that's the sound you want to make, and you try to make it, then you can't settle for anything else.
right,
That's
right.
the sound that you want to have. I can just jump forward a little bit, as long
Please,
as we're
yeah,
talking about sound, which is, I think, a really important thing to talk about.
yeah,
Um, After I graduated from high school, I went to Curtis Institute of Music.
hmm
So I went up there for an audition with Dan Hinger,
hmm
and I played all my pieces, my snare drum solo, my timpani thing, and my marimba pieces. And then he gave me a timpani stick and said, "Make the biggest sound you can." And so I made the loudest sound I could.
hmm
And he said, "No, no, no, make the biggest sound you can." So I kept making the loud. I didn't know what he was talking about. I kept
yeah,
making the biggest sound. Then he took the stick out of my hand and made this glorious, huge note
hmm
sound on timpani.
hmm
And I spent the next 4 years working on that sound, trying to get that sound. That's basically the main thing I learned
yeah, yeah.
in music school.
Well, it's I mean, there's a it's like when you make the sound for the first time that you've been wanting to get, like, yeah, you hear it, but for me, I'm very kinesthetic, and I don't want to speak for percussionists in general, but feel is a big thing. And like, I know what it feels like now to play a deep
Right.
sound. I know when I need a thin sound. Like, thin sounds aren't bad. There's no value judgment on making a thin sound because sometimes it's
Yeah.
called for, but thin sounds can be big and have depth to
Sure.
them, and, um, so was there a moment when you would like when you hit that when you finally got that sound and Mr. Hinger sort of lit up, like was there a, like,
Yeah.
when you hit a perfect fifth when you're singing with somebody, you hear the room sort of starts to resonate in a way, like, do you
Yeah.
remember that first moment of hitting that sound or getting that sound that you wanted?
I'm not sure I ever got it quite from Mr. Hinger. In fact, he told me, I think this is, I don't know, probably near my 4th year in school. He said, because I had technique and all that sort of stuff. And he said, "You really need to get out there and play.
Mm,
That's the
hmm
next step for you." It's almost like he brought me as far as he could
yeah,
in a student-teacher relationship, and I needed to get out and play with professional musicians, other people in you know real settings.
yeah,
So I don't think it was until after I got out of school and I started being around mature musicians who played with that sort of approach that I was able to get a sound. I don't remember the first time, but I remember some important sounds. Like one of my favorite sounds was in Toronto. I played for a long time as timpanist with the opera company,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you've ever played the opera Tosca,
Mm-mm.
but there's a moment. I think it's right before she dies or right after. There's a huge orchestral moment, and there's a unbelievably great timpani note. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember playing that note and actually surprising myself at how much I liked it. So those moments don't happen too often. That
I
when you can please yourself, then that's really great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there for me, I've been fortunate enough to be on a lot of great stages and play with a lot of really great people. And I have three of my favorite people in the world that I regularly get to play with.
Yeah.
But I still think of playing Mahler 2 in grad school at Yale. I was playing the bass drum part, and there's
Oh yeah.
this huge bass drum note that comes in when the organ finally enters at the end, and it's just like what. And hit that bass drum, and it was like one of those, like, the perfect hit. The bass drum was tuned properly. I had, I
Yeah.
rarely tune my bass drums now just because I'm lazy, but like at that moment I was obsessed about it, and I hit that bass drum, and it was like, like what that Kirk Gibson highlight where he hits the home run and he runs
Yeah.
around the bases just pumping his fist. Like
Right.
I think I might have done that in the show. Like it was the most like exciting and ecstatic thing I to this day have experienced.
Yeah. Well,
It,
those are great moments, but you can get those moments on bass drum. In fact, another incident was this was when many years later, Nexus was actually playing with the Philadelphia Orchestra, which is, of course, a
mhm,
great thrill in itself. But uh, they were along the program. We were doing the Takamitsu Concerto, but on the same program was Firebird
mhm.
that Philadelphia was playing. So Bill Kahn and I sat in the audience for one of the rehearsals. And you probably remember that moment near the end of Firebird. There's this huge bass drum
Mm,
moment,
mhm.
and Tony Orlando was playing bass drum. And Tony Orlando made this unbelievably sound. In fact, I think he even jumped in the air to make the sound. And Bill Kahn and I grabbed each other's arm and said, wow, that's great." One of those sounds, that you don't hear that often,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
and it's thrilling.
it's one of the things I think if I were to look back and tell my college version of myself or my high school version of myself when I was really obsessed with playing like really fast snare drum solos or, working up Merlin or something on marimba, that like there's it's not that you can't get that with Merlin. I wasn't able to get there with that. But like taking pride in the one note that you have to hit and really
Yeah.
savor it. Like oftentimes that's where the most productivity as a human is in that one perfectly placed, well thought out thing. And there can be a lot of stress with one note, but also, oh my God, the pleasure I get from, and I still will
Yeah.
like, I just like will randomly watch videos of Mahler 2 just to wait for that moment because
That moment, yeah.
it remind, I have, so what, I mean, for you, what would you tell college Russell right now? Like you're almost 82. Is there something that you would look back and say, like, if you could grab him for 1 second and say, bud, trust me on
Oh,
this, trust me on this.
I don't know. It's a hard thing to imagine. Uh, I had so many good teachers and so many great colleagues as you do.
Hmm.
Uh, I think uh, I don't know if I would tell my younger self anything other than just uh, associate as much as you can with wonderful musicians,
Hmm. Hmm.
and just try to fit in.
Hmm. What do you mean by fit in?
Well, uh,
Because that's a
I
complicated phrase.
yeah, but I probably, well, I know I learned as much from my colleagues in Nexus as
Hmm.
my teachers, as I did from my
Hmm.
teachers. I
Hmm.
mean, I learned the fundamentals and all, of course, from my teachers, but just being around John Wire and Bob Becker and Bill Pond, those guys who uh, approach everything with integrity. Every note they play is meaningful.
Hmm.
Uh, they don't take anything for granted in terms of trying to achieve the highest level of musicianship all the time.
Hmm.
You hear about this with athletes that they work so hard at every little aspect of it and try really, really hard all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't slough off. You have to pay attention.
Mm.
One thing I tell my students, which nobody told me, but I think it's important, is that you have to think about every sound you make. Even when you're wandering around the percussion studio tapping on things
Mm-hmm.
to hear what they sound like, you have to you have to think about even how you're tapping,
Mm.
so that the sound you produce is the sound that you want. Uh, it takes a while to develop your own personal sound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been reading a lot about Bill Evans, the piano player,
Mm-hmm.
and he's really concerned about sound and uh, talks a lot about the kind of sound you make. And those, I just can't stress how important it is to be conscious all the time of every sound you make.
Yeah. Well, what are some things now that what are some things that you used to stress about that now at 82 you sort of, not that you don't care about them, because of course, you wouldn't have gotten to this point if you didn't care about everything you did on some level.
Yeah.
But what are some things now that you just worry less about?
Well, I guess seeing the overview that I sort of have at this point,
Mm-hmm.
I see that, well, the music business, for example, changes a lot.
Mm.
Uh, so you kind of have to be prepared for that. Uh, we as percussionists tend to be a little bit prepared anyway because we have to learn so many instruments, and
Mm-hmm.
and you never know what doors are going to open for you and what opportunities are become going to become available. And so you just have to be ready for them and you know try everything, take everything that comes along and see where it takes you.
What was your first? I mean, when you were like, say, my age in Nexus, like, what was some of the first noticeable changes to the music industry that you were perceiving in real time?
Uh, well, of course, Nexus itself was kind of doing things that other well, there weren't really many other ensembles, percussion ensembles that were doing things. So we were doing a lot of experimental kinds of things. But around that, uh, I saw the recording industry change. Like in Toronto, they were doing a lot. They used to do a lot of film recording and commercial recording.
Mm-hmm.
And when uh, when computers and drum machines and all that sort of thing came in, that sort of changed, and that world dried up.
Mm.
Um, and even the freelance world, I think, dried up a lot.
Mm.
And percussionists in general seem to gravitate toward university teaching rather than orchestral playing.
Mm.
Uh, so right now, when I was a student, everybody, of course, the real only opportunity was to play in an orchestra if you wanted to make any money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's what we all sort of aspired to do, at least for a while, although those aspirations for me changed fairly early. Um, but nowadays, it seems to me like people like Michael Burritt are the percussionists that a lot of young players would like to be.
Mm.
He's a great player,
Mm-hmm.
does a lot of solo stuff, composition, and teaches. And then the percussion ensemble world has changed a lot, and that's because of you guys in So and Third Coast and Sandbox, and
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe you could even talk about um, how how So has um, what the focus of So has been, uh, as opposed to or contrasted with what Nexus was into.
That's a really interesting question to pose. I mean, it's something that, this is my I'm going into my 21st year in the group. And so I'm aware that there's still hopefully another 25 years to go.
Yeah.
But there's enough data to look back on and be like, okay, this particular, viewpoint we had on music or playing together, this worked, this didn't. Here's why this worked, and here's why this didn't. And you mentioned in school that for you, one of the only opportunities to make money was to play in an orchestra. And I
Right.
would say when I was in school, it was either get a college teaching job or play in an orchestra.
Uh-huh.
That was the primary. Like when I went to PASIC, most of the performances were, there was a lot of emphasis put on like orchestral excerpts and labs and talking about taking auditions and things like that. And I sort of felt like, well, that is what I have to do. But there was always that poster of you guys. It was a Pearl ad, except you're all around African drums, which I thought was amazing that you somehow pulled off that ad with not a single Pearl drum in the mix.
Pearl.
um,
Well, as I learned in our recording session, we had a different relationship with Pearl than you guys did.
yeah, well, things again, like for me, that was the primary sort of way of thinking. These are your two routes to go. And then it wasn't really, I mean, not like percussion ensemble was discouraged and I was freelancing and playing steel pan and all that stuff in Akron. But it wasn't until I got to Yale when Bob sort of pushed on me the talking about you guys, but also So was sort of already doing its own thing by that point, by the time I was in school. It was, yes, college teaching was important. Yes, orchestra is important. And there's this other thing that's happening right now that I think you should pay attention to. And chamber music, playing in a small chamber group unconducted, was I would say the biggest thing. I mean, people think about Bob as a marimba teacher and it's like, oh, you're going to go there and be a marimba jock. It's like, actually, timpani and chamber music are the two things that I did the most with Bob when I was there. And when I joined So, I think the thing that we were really yearning for was more rep on the level of pieces like drumming or four organs or things that were like, these are not even, drumming is an evening length work, but four organs is 20 minutes long and pieces of wood is 12 minutes long. And you only have these four pieces of wood you got to lug around. You're not setting up a whole, stage full of stuff. And so, but there was a handful of those pieces, and Xenakis, of course, is in that mix, and John Luther Adams was in the mix at that point. John Cage, obviously, but even Third Construction is 11 minutes, and you're setting up all this gear and then you're just done. And that setup just sits there for the rest of the concert. And
Yeah.
I'd take a bullet for that man and that piece. But the evening length work was a thing that I think we were like, if string quartets can do this, they're going to play 3 or 4 pieces on the first half and then do a Beethoven string quartet for 45 minutes. Why aren't percussion groups doing that on a regular basis? And I think where we diverted a little bit from Nexus is that none of us, well, Jason is a good improviser. I think he did a lot of that when he was at Eastman. That's not I'm not good at that, or at least I wasn't schooled in that on a regular basis. And so a lot of our early stuff was, we're going to commission, David Lang and Julia Wolf and all, try to get 45-minute long pieces, Bryce Desner and that sort of became this thing. And then I would say SOCI was the other thing. The educational component was something that also blew up the rep side of things. And now looking back, I think this is our 17th year of SOCI. And when I look at the amount of pieces that have been written for SOCI just by itself, and then the composers who go out and work with other percussionists and all that stuff, I'm really proud of that data. And it's not in spite of Nexus. It's because we saw you guys being like, yeah, this is the thing you can do. And, you guys always talked about how you weren't a full-time group purposefully. And maybe I'm misunderstanding something that I've heard. But we also were like, no, I'm going to get a salary from this. This is good. There's trade-offs. It's not been all peaches and cream the whole time. But like, that was another thing I think we really wanted to assert could be done. In the same way that you want to be a mechanic, you can get a salary doing that. You can be, or an orchestra player, you can do this for a living. I think I answered your prompt there, but
yeah,
it's fun.
You did. So I'd be interested. I think it's great, and it's great to hear you clarify sort of one of So's purposes anyway, with these evening long or longer pieces that take up a major part of a program. How would you say now that there are other groups that are more or less full-time or aspiring to be full-time percussion ensembles like Third Coast and Sandbox, and I guess there's others that probably you know about that I don't. So in the way that you differentiated yourself from Nexus, how do you think these other groups differentiate themselves from So? Because So is now, like it or not, one of the senior
Yeah.
ensembles,
Yeah. Well, I just
There's a lot.
had my first colonoscopy a couple months ago, so I'm now officially on the other half of my life. So yeah,
Yeah, well, you'll probably have many more.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was the best night of sleep I ever, best nap I ever had. So I'm okay with that.
Good.
Yeah, that's I. I'm curious if you had any of these feelings too. Maybe you were mature enough to not really engage with it, but one of the things that was hard isn't the right word, was interesting is I didn't clock that I would actually have a little jealousy
Oh,
from time to
okay.
time. Not like I don't even know if that's the right word, but just seeing other groups do a thing and be like, oh, they beat us to the punch on this thing, or to feel like,
Right.
to have the moment of feeling like, oh my God, is the playground big enough for everybody? Like, are
Oh,
we, have we inspired our own demise? you know, and that, I would say 10 years ago, that was more of a thought that I had. I mean, seeing Third Coast and Sam, I mean, Third Coast is, I was almost in school. David Skidmore was a year behind me at Yale. So they've been around for 18 years as well.
right.
But to see a group like Sandbox come up, Victor Cachese, we know all those guys, but Victor was at our very first SOCI 17 years
Oh,
ago.
wow. Yeah.
And to see those guys do the work that they're doing and to hear the way their hands work is humbling. It's
Wow.
really like, oh my hands did that for about 2 weeks when I was at Yale. And then, and now
I'm
like
sure that's not true, but
the skill set I have, I think is unique to myself and to the So guys. And I think we bring a thing that's unique to the world. But I would say it's been great to see, in Third Coast has really gone really in deep with Philip Glass, in terms, he's a composer that So has never played. We love his music. Einstein on the Beach is like life changing. And there's many, it's just he and So have never really crossed paths in any way. And so it's nice to, and I think the approach we would bring to Philip's music would be unique to us, but I think the way that Third Coast does it is like, great, somebody's doing that. There's other people helping lift the weight with us now.
right.
And so I worked quickly through my jealousy of feeling like, hey, this is my Sandbox, to now feeling like in Sandbox working with Andy Akiho and really getting evening length works like Pillars out there. Like
Right.
that's stuff that So's probably not going to do and would not do at the level that they're doing it. And it's just really, I'm curious now to see what those guys look back on and see as their data points of ways that they changed. What I haven't actually asked them, like, what is the thing you saw? Like for us, it was rep.
Right.
And the full-time sort of approach, like none of us are having side jobs. This is our full-time gig. But what was that answer for Third Coast? And what was that answer for Sandbox? And what was that answer for Line Upon Line or whoever else is out there doing that? I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that it's just really, it's nice to not be alone in the Sandbox. I think that's the thing that I'm grateful for now as I'm trying to be mature about the way I think about things.
Well, the great thing is that the world is big enough for lots of percussion groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that's talking about the way things have changed in the last 20 or 30 years. That's a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, there's repertoire.
Yeah.
When I was a student at Curtis, they didn't even allow percussionists to play a solo recital because they thought there wasn't enough repertoire. And in a way, they were kind of right,
Yeah.
except for transcriptions and
Yeah.
everything. But, this jealousy thing, I don't think anybody in Nexus ever felt jealous or had any kind of feelings about So or any of these other groups because we tried to develop some repertoire. We're supported a lot by the Canada Council and
Mm-hmm.
other grant organizations in Canada, and they really wanted us to commission real composers.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, what they meant was other than ourselves,
Mm-hmm,
and we
mm-hmm,
were all composing at the time. But they wanted us because the boards that made those decisions were mostly composers,
mm-hmm,
and so they wanted us to commission real composers, and we did a lot. But many of those pieces were not successful
mm-hmm,
for one reason or another.
mm-hmm,
Some were, but the only composers that really worked great for us were people like Takamitsu, who's
mm-hmm,
not Canadian, and with the big concerto, and Gavin Bryars had what a great piece, and a
mm-hmm,
few people. But the most successful compositions were our own.
mm-hmm.
Uh, so I think it's great that you guys have really made contact with percussionists and composers and people in various musical communities that are developing and writing pieces with you and for you. So the whole repertoire thing, it's not just percussion ensemble anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You're working with Caroline Shaw and all that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's music that people want to listen to, which is different. And I think that's one thing Nexus was able to do is come up with repertoire that people wanted to listen to.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think you guys are developing that too.
Well, I'm reading Bill's book. The title escapes me right now.
Bill Kahn's book,
Yes.
Unpopular Music.
Yes,
That one.
Unpopular Music. That's right. And there were two things in there that struck me. One, I think he talks about the first time you put any of George Hamilton Green's music on a concert, because it was most of your shows at that point were fully improvised.
Yeah.
And that you guys were nervous about it. And like, is this a novelty? Is the audience gonna think this is dumb? Like, this isn't what they expect from us, but then Bill's like, and everybody went bonkers, like afterwards.
Yeah.
And I would say, when there's many things, I think the improv thing is something that Nexus has uniquely carved out as a viable, like, this is what we do. But then I think the resurgence of George Hamilton Green's music, obviously through, Bob's artistry and his ability to play the xylophone at that level. But that's a thing, I think, as a percussion group. When people string quartets talk about the baggage they carry around of Beethoven and Haydn, and like, it's like, oh my God, Bartok. It's like the baggage we had as percussionists when we were starting a group is like, what's our ragtime? What's the thing that is going to make, like, I remember you guys came and played at LPR for a night of awesomeness, I think it was called.
Yeah, that was a great night.
People went ballistic, like they were at a Radiohead concert, or they went to see Billy Joel or something. And can you talk a little bit, like, it reads to me in the book that you guys kind of stumbled on it. It wasn't like this is what we're going to do now. It was like, let's try this out. And it became a thing. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution of, like, how did those conversations go in Nexus before you, like, was Bob nervous to bring it to the table? Were you guys skeptical? Like, what was the vibe like around that?
Well, let's see. Bill was collecting records.
Mm-hmm.
Back in those days, we all scoured antique stores and
Mm-hmm.
Secondhand stores for any instruments and records.
Mm-hmm.
Back in those days, it was difficult to find exotic sort of or non-Western percussion instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime we found a bell or a gong or some
Mm-hmm.
weird drum, it was exciting. We called each other and said, I found this thing. It's Tibetan finger symbol. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody would get together and try, listen to it. It was everything like that was exciting. Now you can get everything from Steve Weiss. So it's not the same.
People forget that
Bill,
Steve Weiss did not exist when you guys, the other thing in this book that's blowing my mind is, like, poor Ray Dillard had to drive like a truck filled with 300 gongs that you guys bought. And it's like, the baggage overages on that must have just been insane. As somebody who spends more time in airports than I care of it.
I mean, it's talking about Steve Weiss. When I was at Curtis, Steve Weiss would pull up in front of the Curtis building with his car, open the trunk, and have a bunch of gongs and bells that he would try to sell to us Curtis kids. That's the level Steve Weiss was at the time. Yeah. So, but Bill was collecting. He found these. He discovered that George Hamilton Green recorded, I don't know, hundreds of records, a whole bunch of records, and he was collecting them and bought a turntable that he could play them on. And Bob had been given a lot of George Hamilton Green solos by Bill Street when Bill Street, his teacher at Eastman, retired.
Mm.
So Bill had this collection of pieces, that were published by Green, and so they kind of figured out together that Bill could listen to the arrangements and make some arrangements, and Bob also made some arrangements, and Bob started practicing this music that he had been given, and started listening to the recordings of George Hamilton Green playing them
Mm.
and trying to play in that style, and of course he's able to better than anybody ever ever has since. And so it's just something we were trying out. And I don't think we were nervous about it. I mean, the fact is, Bob plays so great that we, everybody was astounded at that. We were. And then, of course, once we played them for an audience, they were too.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there was any fear factor there. Just that we were just beginning to be able to do some of those things. And of course, back in those days, Michael Craden was a member of Nexus, and
Mm-hmm.
he couldn't read music. So he added a little table of broken-headed tambourine and a cowbell and a few cracked cymbals.
Mm-hmm.
He played along, and of course was great. Added an interesting dimension to those pieces. We were also into Spike Jones at the time,
Mm-hmm.
listening to recordings. I grew up watching Spike Jones on TV. I guess you guys, do you know Spike Jones?
Yeah, but I'm not as fluent in the work as you are. I didn't grow up on it
so
quite like you did.
We were all influenced by that, and of course Harry Partch at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
So little things like that just kind of crept in. The ragtime was the first thing, and then of course African drumming that I was studying and Bob was studying at Wesleyan, and those things little by little came into the group.
Well, I would say that was one of the biggest influences I think you all have had on us is the, sometimes in institutional learning in the academy, things that are considered world musics are sort of like the things that are floating on the outside, that they're not as important as, playing Bach or Beethoven or whatever. And I always, that was a thing I perceived. Whether or not anybody was actively saying that to me is a different story. But playing steel drum and so was something that I was kind of afraid to do. And it was something that was like, a passion of mine. When no one was looking, that's what I was doing. And to see you guys embrace different cultures' music, and not be afraid to bring it into the mix, it was something I was like, okay. Well, and I'm really grateful now, 20 years later, that I had that in my life, and that I was able to sort of have the guts to insert it into a world that, frankly, it didn't really much exist in 20 years ago, in as much as I think as I wanted it to be.
Was there any? Did you feel fearful or reluctant to bring steel pan into so?
A little bit, only for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to make sure that my mentors from the Caribbean steel band world, Cliff Alexis and Boogsie Sharp, like those are people that changed my life, and I wanted them to see what I was doing as respecting the instrument and the culture from whence it came as the primary thing. Whether or not they liked the music that was coming out of it, I kind of didn't care about that. It was like, do you think I'm appropriately being a good steward of this instrument for you all? So my fear was a little bit of, I really wanted to avoid anytime steel pan was played in a contemporary setting, people thinking about Jimmy Buffett. And I say that not as a knock on Jimmy Buffett, but that is like, oh, it's a cruise ship, where's your flowered shirt? Like those sorts of things were things that I was just terrified of. And thankfully I had 3 other bandmates who were like, yeah, that's a cool sound. It's a unique sound, just like the marimba. And every time you hear the marimba, people don't think of, oh, that's Chiapas marimba playing. It's like, no. I mean, that's awesome, but there's a million ways you can look at this stuff. And for me here, Cliff Alexis came to one of our shows that we did in Illinois, and I remember him coming up and just asking me a ton of questions and just feeling like, oh, thank God, like, okay, all right, this is okay. And my bandmates respect the instrument as well, and they never really looked at it as a weird thing to be sticking in the mix. So
kind of getting back to one of the questions you asked about the way things have changed in the last number of years. Uh, what do you think about? It's my impression that world music or in percussion, the inclusion of ideas or instruments or structural ideas from non-Western music in Western percussion music is kind of not as uh, not as prevalent as it used to be. It seems like it's kind of cycled out of
Hmm.
use.
How do you mean? Go clarify that a little bit for me, if you don't mind.
Well, when Nexus was first getting into it,
Hmm.
uh, a lot of people were doing something. Glenn Velez
Hmm.
was starting this frame drum revolution, and
Hmm.
uh, a lot of people were playing African-related kinds of things, and
Hmm.
a lot of involvement with tabla players and Indian music.
Hmm.
Uh, it seems like that's kind of died out to me,
Hmm.
or I don't know whether it's intentional or it's kind of run its course, or maybe it's gone in a different direction. What do you think?
That's a good question. I would say for so, just to be frank, I think the pandemic era, there was a lot of attention paid to cultural appropriation and,
Right,
and
right,
those sorts of things, which are issues. And in general, I find that they're only issues when they're done poorly. When somebody
right.
does it and it's not done thoughtfully or not done as a good steward of the culture from which you are inspired by,
Yeah,
that's when it's bad. And that's when it is, it's not a jailable offense, but it is something that it's not in good taste, right? And
sure.
so I think a lot of people genuinely, just because they don't have experience with it, are afraid, and so
Uh-huh.
they don't reach out and try to take the step to do it because I'm a kid from Ohio, so I shouldn't be thinking about
Right.
African music or unless I've lived in Africa or whatever. But the older I get, the more I'm finding. Um, at least with I can speak for the four of us. We are really, I think our first trip to Trinidad was a big game changer for not just for me to have the guys go down there with us, but for them too to sort of be embraced by another culture and be taught music in the way that they're taught. Sort of like the rote style teaching is a bit
Right.
was a big is how all the music is disseminated there, and frankly in most of the world actually that's the way music is disseminated.
Yeah.
Um, and then coming back, we commissioned Kendall Williams to write us a piece for Mallet Quartet, and he called it Panorama, and it's based on the Panorama steel drum form. I don't know if
Mhm.
have I sent you a video of that yet?
I don't think so. No,
I'll
be great
send
to
you
see.
one later.
Okay.
And to talk to him and be like, man, that thing that we did in Trinidad is rad, but there's no way that like, can the four of us do some version of it on a sort of pre-existing format in a world so that when we're on stage we can play Steve Reich's Mallet Quartet and also Panorama by Kendall Williams. And so
Right.
he wrote us this 12-minute long bonkers piece, just absolutely insane, all by rote. He taught it to us by rote over the course of like 4 years.
Wow.
And because we'd only see him for like 3 hours a month, and so he would teach us 30 seconds of music over those course of
Right.
those 3 hours, then we wouldn't see him for 3 months, and we'd forget half of it. And
Yeah.
um and then we had also been sort of tangentially working with Olivier Tarpaga. Our next trip that we took together was to Benin, to Togo, Benin, and Burkina Faso. And Olivier is a choreographer and a djembe player, but a choreographer sort of at heart. And he wrote us a piece all by rote that was using, he practices djembe by like using his knuckles on a table
Mhm.
when he doesn't have access to a drum. And so he taught us this piece that we played at PASIC a couple years ago, where you're just like drumming with your hands and getting different knuckle sounds and whatever, and it's absolutely tears your fingers up. But and then another piece that uses little African bells, and he taught us a piece that was for balafon, that was a folk tune from his mother's hometown where he was born. And again, to work with somebody like Olivier, for whom he didn't look at us as like four dumb white guys. It was like, these are four guys who are interested in what I'm
Right.
doing.
Right.
And they are interested in being interesting and unique. And so he wrote us stuff, and he's just like, now what would So do with this? That I don't want to write this thing just so that everybody in the world picks up and it's like, oh, cool, an African piece. Like, he was like, what? So there's a synthesizer that got thrown in the mix. And, you know, I'm playing this. We're working on a second piece with Olivier now. Then there's steel drums that open up one of the pieces. And so I think for us, it's definitely part of our diet now. And I think the older we get, the less I think afraid we are. Like Adam plays talking drum in one of the pieces.
Oh, wow.
And it's really cool. And Olivier loves it. And that particular piece just got licensed by Nike for an ad with LeBron James and Serena Williams. And so
Wow.
you know, it's really, but I hear what you're saying. I think, I would say early on for us, the working with people like David Lang, more contemporary composers,
Right.
for whom their influences were rock music and other things that weren't necessarily, you know, African based or whatever. But I would say for us, we're really we're going to Korea in August.
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
then we're stopping in Hawaii on the way back to do a show, and we're working with some drummers who do like Hawaiian specific. It's totally rad. I've never seen anything like it before in my life. And we're trying to really go back to, and I think the other influence we had from you guys was just that embracing of like, I'm going to get in the room with people who know what they're talking about and just be there. I'm going to fit in. Like, what do I need to do to be one of you? I want to eat the food. I want to drink the beer. I want to do the thing that is happening only in Burkina Faso, or only in South Korea, or only in Honolulu. And so for us, I think we are trying to really re-inject that consciously back into our sort of process.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear all that. It sounds like you're bringing it back in a sort of a sophisticated way. You're not trying to play traditional music in any kind of traditional way, but just bringing it into your repertoire in a way that So would normally handle situations like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say you guys, I mean, you've worked with people, you know, in the African music world in depth in a way that we necessarily haven't. I'm probably So I'm the one that has like spent the most time in a specific culture's music. And but So's not going to go out and play a calypso tune. Like that's just not, I think the other guys don't feel comfortable. They haven't grown up and lived in that world enough to feel like they have a say in it. Like what is the thing that can only happen when the four of us are in the room? And Jason's a great vibraphone player. Eric's a killer vibraphone player. Adam is a killer marimba player. And I know enough about steel drum music to make the bass part sound good, you know? And so and so what we get is something heavily influenced by Trinidadian culture, but is a thing that only the four of us can do when we're in the room. And, you know, for better or worse, I hope in 20 years I look back on it and I'm like, yeah, that was the right call. But
yeah, it sounds like it probably was.
Well, let me ask you, there was a funny story in Bill's book where he talks about you guys had pre-planned a show, an improv that was going to be completely silent. And he walked out and bumped into a bell or something, and you guys all like turned and snapped and look at him like, dude, we talked about this. Like, can you tell me just a little bit of like some of your favorite, like what's your in your dying breath, what's the thing you're going to be like, you guys remember that hilarious thing that Russ or that, you know, Bill did or something?
Well, a lot of the interesting ones happened with Bill. His character, but you know, that was back in the early days. We were doing, I think 2 weeks residency at York University north of Toronto. We played a concert, I think every night. We had Pauline Oliveras come with us and Trisha Shankran and all these people. Abraham Adzenia came up. Well, that was an embarrassing one. That was the first and last time we let Adzenia, who was our Ghanaian teacher, tell us what to wear.
Why is that?
Well, he told us he brought these clothes. It's an African shirt and shorts, African shorts.
Okay.
So we come out on stage. There's these 5 white guys with pasty white legs. And Adzenia, who's like Arnold Schwarzenegger of Africans, at this glistening, beautiful body playing, and the audience just cracked up. I mean, it was like it was hilarious to see it. I mean, the playing was okay, but the look of it was.
Do you think he cared, or do you think you cared?
No, he didn't care.
Yeah,
we cared. He didn't care. course, they were looking at him. They didn't care about it. But on that same series of concerts, that's when that Bill Kahn story. So we'd always done improvisations with no instruction or intention, just
Mm-hmm.
totally free. Nobody would say anything
Mm-hmm.
about what we were going to do. We'd just go out and start playing.
Yeah.
So Bill said, okay, this time, because Bill was he had just written a piece where you pretend to play instruments. It's a multi-percussion piece but you don't actually hit them,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Back that was like early theater percussion
Yeah.
piece. So Bill said, well, let's go out and we'll just pretend to hit things, but not really hit them. We'll do that. And so we walk out on stage and just going like, moving our arms. And the first thing Bill does is hit a cymbal. And, he swings and hits. And so we all broke up. And from that point on, it was like a normal improv. Like
Yeah.
the imaginary stroking of instruments didn't last very long until we just went into a regular improv.
That's amazing.
No, Bill Bill was just so great, or he still is so great. But we had if we're talking about those kinds of anecdotal experiences, for some reason, we were hired to play a church service in Toronto
Mm-hmm.
at a Metropolitan United Church or something. I don't know why what was in their mind to have this percussion group play in a church service, but we had all our we only did improvisation. We had our improv set up sort of circling around the outside of the congregation. And the guy said, just play whenever you feel like it fits into whatever we're doing. So the minister was doing the scripture reading, and Bill had this flower pot he put a head on it, and it was like a friction drum with
Mm-hmm.
like a wooden rod sticking through it. So it sounded sort of like a weird cuica
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
kind of thing, but really loud and screechy. So the preacher was reading the scripture and said, and the Blessed Virgin Mary held the baby Jesus to her breast. And at that moment, Bill goes, the loudest sound you can possibly imagine on this flower pot drum. And the rest of us, we couldn't hold it in. We just totally broke up.
Listen, church giggles are real. It's the
That
real
was
thing.
real. A lot of moments like that. I'm sure you have some of those too.
Yeah, I'm as I'm entering my 21st year, being in a group it can be very hard personally. Like there's a lot of strong personalities. Everybody's an executive director.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
And we've had fights and disagreements and uncomfortable moments in rehearsal, and nobody likes to take criticism, including myself.
Right.
I don't like to give it, and I don't like to take it, and I'm bad at taking it. But I am super grateful for those guys, and I know that, as time passed, you mentioned John Wire and now Robin Engelman have both passed away, and I'm
Right.
curious, like if you were to be able to just say one thing to those guys, each of them separately, like what's something you miss about those guys? What did they bring to the table that nobody else can bring?
I think it's the same that you would say about is that each member of Nexus, even though we had the same concept of sound, like we were talking about, and approach to musicality, each one had a strong personality and played differently, and each had his own things that he brought to the table that nobody else did, that none of the rest of us did. And it's one of those magical things that the mix together was successful. It just somehow worked out. So, each one of those guys was different in his own way. And, I'm just thankful that they were themselves and they brought that to the rest of us, influenced us and contrasted with us in a beautiful way.
That's really well put. And doing the Ghost of Christmas Past is always a tricky thing. And it's like, cause you're never going to get to do that really. But I'm trying to, like, when I leave the guys after a rehearsal or whatever, I just try to say, like, love you guys. Love can mean many different things. And it's like, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I want the last thing they hear me say is like, no matter how much, I pissed you off today because I didn't take criticism well or whatever. Just know that. And
Well, it's good you say that. I mean, we never really said that, but I think we felt it. Everybody felt it with each other. We still do. I mean, I still see Bob and Bill and Gary
Mhm.
quite a bit. So,
Yeah. Well,
and
I want to be respectful of your time. I just have three quick questions for you. What is your, if you have any that you're willing to express, what is your biggest regret, just in life in general? And then what is your biggest weakness and what's your biggest strength? Those are three big ones. And then I'll let you go. I'll let you off the hook.
that's too tough. So what's the first one?
What's one regret you have that if you could go back and change it, knowing that you can,
Well,
but just
I
like what?
don't know. I mean, I think about things that I would change, but then if I changed them, then things wouldn't have worked out the way. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, my mother was a piano teacher,
Mm-hmm.
but she never insisted I learn piano, and
Mm-hmm.
I never learned piano really. Uh, and I think that's one reason I went into music is because I wasn't forced into music early.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, on the other hand, I wish I had piano chops, and you know,
Me too.
I'd be a better marimba player probably if I had done that.
My mom was a
So
French
I
and Spanish teacher, and I would like refuse to learn either one of them really well. And now
oh
I'm like,
really?
I'm such an idiot. If I just learned Spanish just a little bit better, I would be
Yeah,
much more.
yeah. So it's one of those things that if I changed it, things would have worked out so differently that maybe my life would be totally different in a way that wasn't as good as the way it turned out.
Hmm.
Okay, what's your next question?
What's your biggest weakness and what's your biggest strength
Musically?
in general? It can be musically, but like, what's the thing where you're just like, damn it, I'm 82 and I still am can't get this thing right, or I'm still stressed out or insecure about this thing.
Uh, oh, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there's lots of things. Uh, yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I can't answer it.
I hope. Well, one of my dreams is that whenever I get to, if I make it to 82, is that I don't even care about my weaknesses. Like they're just there, and it's like, well, this is who I am.
Well, that's one of the good things about being older is you don't care so much, or you realize that things are just the way they are. There's a great, I don't know if you read the New York Times, there was
Hmm.
a great article a couple of days ago. They were asking celebrities what it was like being over 80. And they asked Bob Dylan.
Hmm.
And Bob Dylan it's, of course, everything he says is sort of poetic and
Hmm. Hmm.
really beautiful about the way life just continues and you're there watching it. You're not,
Hmm.
you're just watching it pass by as you observe. So at this stage, I'm just kind of observing things, and I don't stress out about things like I
Hmm.
used to.
Hmm.
Uh, uh,
Well, what's your biggest strength? What's the thing you're most proud of about like the way that you operate? Maybe in a musical setting. Like, what's the thing that you feel like you bring to the table that you're really psyched about?
I think the one thing that I could do was get along with people and
Mm.
play with people without getting in the way. I feel like I can fit in.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm not a soloist.
Hmm.
I never was a soloist particularly. Uh, but I think my ego wasn't strong in the way that I had to have it my way.
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
perfectly happy to go along with somebody else and discover their way and
Hmm.
try to play with that and learn from their time sense or their
Yeah.
musical feel in a way that helps me too. But I've never felt the need to really impose my own musical will on others.
It's very interesting that you say that, and that we sort of wrap up on that note. I think one of the things that I'm turning 47 in July, and one of the things that I used to be insecure about was that I always felt like I was a really good follower.
Yep.
Like no matter where Jason's it just intuitively is a natural leader whenever he plays.
Sure.
His what he's
Yep.
about to do is very clear. And I am so good at helping him sound amazing. like, yeah, not maybe that's the wrong way to put it, but like
No, that's true. I'm sure he appreciates that too.
I'm really, really good. And when I have to lead, I have to practice that. Like I have to go in the room and be like, and practice my, my cues and stuff, because it's a thing that doesn't come intuitively to me. But I love being around other people and sort of being like, oh, that's a choice I wouldn't have made. Why'd they make that choice? And how can I help them? How can I help make their choice sound like the inevitable one? And
Right.
I've
Well,
go ahead.
you're
Sorry.
a very personable guy. You get along with people. You're a people person, so to speak, and you just in a social context, you're comfortable and you make people feel good just in general. So that's natural that you would carry that into a musical situation.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And one of the things I've observed with you that I will always like, you were the guy that just quietly always had all the sticks, and you always had them packed up afterwards. You always knew where all the cues were. You always knew what everybody else's part was. I remember the first time we rehearsed drumming with you, Bill hadn't played it in a long time, and he's like, "What note do I start on?" And you started at the top of the marimba and went, "Diddle-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo." You got down, and you're like, "This one," and like you finally, and it's like you were shepherding and sort of like making sure that the room, the ecosystem was healthy, and when you saw something that needed fixed, you fixed it. I remember there being a monitor situation when we were in Ojai, and there was some monitor that was just not helpful for the singers, and you just quietly got up and turned the monitor away from them and then sat back down. Like you just yeah, you're there to help other people and fit in. I think people get afraid of fitting in as like, oh, I'm conforming or whatever, but I feel like that energy is necessary in the soup. Otherwise the soup gets too spicy.
Hey, I have a question for you, but I'm not sure you want to record this.
Go for it. I'm an open book.
You can always just chop this off if you don't want. And it has to do with the way we've talked about this a bit before, about the way I teach drumming and the way percussion teaches drumming. And I'm still not clear. I think Adam was very adamant about this, about the way he or you, I guess when you teach it as a group, like all four of you are instructing students.
Yeah, by and large, yeah.
More or less. So you must teach it somewhat the same way, but it has to do with, well, I was down in Knoxville at Neefnorf, and I taught it to students. And within 5 minutes, we established the jargon, the lingo that we could talk about through the whole piece. And that was like, if you phase once, you're on 6, and if you phase twice, you're on 5. And so all through the piece, within, half an hour, everybody knew what we were talking about, and they could tell the other guys if somebody was off that you were, you should be on 5, not 6, that sort of thing. And Adam seemed to have a different way of approaching that, or maybe you guys do. Can you explain to me what that is?
Yeah, honestly, I think that this does go back to like, we obviously have been playing drumming for the entirety of the group's existence. And I think there was an attempt to be like, well, why are we doing this? Like Nexus is already doing this. Steve Reich Musicians is already doing it. Like there's a group already. How do we see this differently? And I think for better or worse, and probably more based on like just the contemporary mindset, everybody agreeing on where one was. Like there's a group one, dug it dun, dug it dun, dug it dun, dug it dun, and how you're going to feel it. And we were like, we wanted it to feel like everybody's feeling it in 3, not dug it dun, 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 and agreeing on that ahead of time. And when you phase, knowing where your relationship is to the group one, and knowing what your new pattern is. So you're not, now you're going dun to get dun to get dun to get dun to get. And that's like, so if we just counted off the piece, everybody could start on 1, knowing what their rhythm was. Right. And I would say when we played it with you guys in Ojai that was my first time playing it with you all, and watching Steve, when he would come in on a pattern, literally count to himself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and come in on 6 and start playing dun dun dug it dun. I was like, well, yeah, of course that. And that's also agreeing on everybody's pattern is dug it dun, dig it dun. It's just where you start that pattern is different. Right. And so I'd say the main thing for us was, trying to feel it as like everybody knows where the group one is. So if you phase or you go around the horn in the phase, you go too far, you move too fast, knowing where you are in that pattern and where you are in relation to one was really important to us.
I still don't quite understand, because what I'm saying is you always know where you are in relation to one. So if you're on 5, you know you're on 5 of the one. But you're saying something different. I'm not sure what it is. So when you teach to somebody,
Mhm.
uh, so they might start the da 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 somewhere in the middle of that pattern. Is
Yes.
that because you want them to all start at the same time?
Yeah, so that's if we count it off, we're going to say, hey, we're going to start on in the fourth movement. We're going to start after the third phase. So the resultant of the third phase before the singers come in. So
Right.
the extra players have already added in. We're doing that third phase. We're going to start right on the downbeat of that resultant. 1, 2, ready, go. Boom. Everybody can start
So,
right there, and we start
so
together.
wherever you are, you know to start there.
Yeah.
See, I think maybe that's kind of at the root of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Steve was teaching to us, or anytime we played it,
Mm-hmm.
there was no attempt to start exactly together
Mm.
anytime. I think we ran into that a bit in the recording session
Yeah, yeah,
too.
yeah.
You guys wanted to start on a dime,
Mm.
and for us, start more or less together. And
Yeah.
that's the way it always was. Like Steve didn't care at all
Mm.
about starting exactly together. Just, let's start here and figure out your part, and when you figure it out, come in.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, that's, I
Um,
mean, again, like that's something I would say too, that when we're playing the piece and teaching it, that is something we're trying to be more conscious of being flexible on. If somebody has a real hard time hearing where the group one is, then saying to them like, okay, hey, you're going to start on the 6, but you're going to be like, da. That is something I think we're starting to introduce in our team. We
so
don't,
that's an alternative way for
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And for me, it's the primary way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, like, to me, that is, I think we weren't in the room with Steve ever learning the piece.
Right.
And so we just assumed, because we didn't have that information, we just assumed it's like, holy crap, this piece is structurally based on this one rhythm.
Right.
Every other piece we play in our lives starts together.
Right.
And nobody, it's like third construction doesn't sort of like everybody start at
Right.
letter S. We're going to, when you find your part, get in there. And I think that was just the default. And I think had we been in the room, but it's like the way you're talking about learning it from Steve is the way we talk about David Lang's music or Caroline Shaw's music. There are people who obsess about details in both of those, where I'm just like, David just wants to see a struggle, right? He doesn't care if you're playing the right board on So-Called Laws of Nature. And Caroline doesn't care about the rhythm she wrote in Taxidermy for the flower pots. She just wants a vibe. But there's no
Right.
way to know that unless you're in the room. So I would say that's probably the most symptomatic or most reasons for what you're perceiving in us
Right.
is.
So when you're teaching it to students who've never played it before, do they pick up on your way easily? Do,
From Yeah, I'd say it varies group to group. Some folks pick it up quicker than others.
sure. Right.
I think we're also getting better at explaining it. I think early on,
Yeah, that has something to do with it.
just like with everything, the more you do it, the more you realize, there's just things you shouldn't say to somebody in the moment. It just, some things can complicate things. So sometimes when you get too nitty gritty into the math of whatever's happening, it's not helpful.
Right.
And I think we play back and forth a lot, just like you said with Mr. Abel. Like when somebody's having a problem, Jason will jump in there and be like, I'm going to play this an octave lower than you, but jam
Right.
with me for a second. And for a lot of folks, just feeling what that feels like is the answer, and not telling them like, no, your rhythm is dun dugga dun dun dugga dun dun dugga dun dun dugga dun, as opposed to dugga dun dun dugga dun dun.
So I'm curious about this, because I just want to know if there's a way that I can teach it better than the way I'm doing now, or that's helpful to people. But part of the reason I do it the way I do is so that everybody in the ensemble knows where everybody else is
Mm,
all the time.
mm-hmm,
So if anybody's off, all you have to do is say 3 or
mm,
6,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and then that person knows they're supposed to be there. So each person knows where they're supposed to be entering. So it seems like with your way, each person would have to know the multiple ways that everybody's entering.
Yeah.
if they want to know
Yeah.
the whole piece, which is a lot to learn.
It can be a lot to learn. I think we're trying to get more. We just did it down at Big Ears in Knoxville, and we're trying to get more in the sense of we're just going to play a lot. Like sometimes the feel is not. You're not going to know what it feels like until you just do it a bunch. And so, like, start on one. Oh, you messed that up, or you came in the wrong place. Let's just do that a million times. Come start on one with us 35 times in a row until you're like, oh, that's okay. Now, if I get off or I get confused, I know where one is and I know how to start my pattern there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope that I am trying to figure out new ways to teach when I'm 82. Like, I think there's some things like you just know it works and you're just like, trust me on this. This is the way, this is the way this goes. But
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm comfortable with the way I'm doing it, and like I say, within the first thing I do is it has one guy phase against another,
yeah.
and they figure out what happens, and then I say, "Well, where are you in relation to their one?" And they always say, "Well, I'm on 2," and then of course you're not. You're on 6 because you're ahead of them. And
Right.
once they understand that, the concept of what happens when you phase, and then they know easily if you phase twice, you're on 5, and this makes sense. So they know right within 5 minutes, the whole ensemble knows how to count everything in the whole piece.
Well, this is the one thing that again, I appreciate you asking me how to do it, how we do it. But the one thing you bring to the table that none of us ever can is you were there when the piece was taught. You know what's sacred and what's not. And you don't put certain things about that piece on a pedestal that other players and future generations are going to do. And that we did, because you were there drinking tea with Steve in his loft and getting frustrated because you were the first people to ever be asked to phase as human beings. Like, those sorts of things. Like, I think what you bring to the table is that. And I would say make sure that any student you're around, including when you're around us, just like always remind us of this stuff. Like, that Steve doesn't care about this thing. This thing you're obsessing about, what he obsessed about was this, because
it's not up to me now. It's up to you. The future generations are learning from you.
Yeah.
They're not learning from me any. I mean, some.
Well, you were just in Knoxville teaching, of course.
Some are, but I mean, in general, you're going to be teaching many more people in the next 40 years. So I don't know. It just it's probably more important to me than anybody else. But just because I do it. But I'll have another question. If you don't, do you have time for?
Please, yeah, absolutely. As long as you have time, I have time.
Okay, so another thing, and this comes up fairly often, teaching drumming, or actually we did Music for 18 down there too, so this came up in Music for 18. There was a couple of things. First of all, some people have trouble playing the afterbeat marimba part. That's the part I play some of that part, and I never had any problem with it or even had to think about it much. But a lot of people have trouble. And I'm sure you've run into that teaching people the Music for 18. How do you tell them? What clues can you give them to do that better? Because I have trouble with it, because it's one of those things was not an issue for me.
Yeah,
so
you're like, just do it.
I don't know how to tell people.
just walk left foot, right foot, left foot, right. We've played that piece probably 4 or 5 times, and I wish that we could do it more often. And I play the downbeat marimba part, and Eric plays the offbeat part.
Right.
And
I'm sure Eric has no problem with it.
No, not at all. But one of the things that I love doing with him on that is really thinking of a longer phrase, because I think in all hocketing, I think people tend to think like ooga ooga, like you're like note to note, event to event. And I think if da 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 da, like thinking of the longer phrase, like where you're headed, rather than trying to hear every one. And often hockets aren't always completely, how do I say this? Aren't completely 100% equally balanced all the time. It's when things feel good is when there's like, dugga, 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 dugga. Like sometimes those inner notes are just like 2% less than the downbeat note.
Right.
And that, that's a nuanced thing, like, because it's not don't, but like just having it feel good oftentimes means that the hocket isn't inherently balanced perfectly.
Right.
And so really futzing with that, I mean, like play the offbeat part really soft, and then balance it up to where it feels good to you. Now balance it up to where you can't tell who's won and who's not. Now balance it where the offbeat is higher. Like really offset it so that it's uncomfortable and it starts to mess up the cellist or the piano players or whoever in the group. And just really futzing with that so that you know where you can and can't go, or where you should and shouldn't go in any performance. And then you have control over the course of 70 minutes or 65 minutes. There are chunks of that piece where it's okay to take 2% off your feel a little bit. And then there's other parts when the maracas come in and you're just driving the bus. And there's parts where the pianists are hanging on for dear life and are going to naturally want to sit back. And at least in our interpretation, like, it's like, no, I'm going to kick you in the pants here because like I want people to like be able to fall asleep in minute 3 and wake up in minute 60 and not have, and nothing's changed in terms of the vibe. But how you do that, you have to have control over that. And so I would say, and honestly, the downbeat player is as much responsible for the offbeat as the offbeat is for their offbeat. That's the other thing too with phasing. I learned this with Jason and drumming is like you're the phaser, right? And Bob's yeah.
Bob sits still, yeah.
Yeah, but Bob's not sitting still.
Right.
Like the two of you are doing this dance. There are days where you move a little quicker than you wanted to, and he's got to keep up with you so that the perception is that he's staying still and that you guys are moving gradually. And so often, when I'm playing, I'm actually singing the whole pattern so that I'm actually playing with Eric. I'm not just going gung, 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 gung. Right. I'm going dugga, 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 dugga. I'm actually singing it so that my head knows what it should sound like. And with most players, you can tell when the person you're playing with isn't really doing that, and they're really only focused on their part. Right. And when you know the other player is really hearing your part, you play better. It's just like a good conversation. Yeah. Whenever if I just stared at my notepad the whole time, your answers would be way less interesting because I don't care. And as a player, really hearing the other part, Eric just plays better whenever I'm really singing with him in my head. Sure. And that piece is so loud at moments where I can actually just sing it out loud with him and no one's going to know, I don't know if that answered your question, but like,
no, those are actually great suggestions. And when I was down in Knoxville, I don't know if you know Kevin Zatina.
Yeah. Kevin was a Soci student.
Okay, so he was there. He was helping coach music for 18, and he had some of those same things about thinking the longer phrase rather than just. So it was good. You guys are really good at that sort of thing. Well, so I have another question.
Before you ask that question, I would also say that switch it up. Have the downbeat player play the offbeat part just so they know what that feels like. That it's you're now hearing, you're hearing the melodies that are coming from the singers or whoever else. You're hearing the melodies, but you're playing every other note of that melody as opposed to the downbeat one. And just being able to walk in those shoes for a little bit, I think is very helpful and humbling too.
Philip Bush is a pianist who plays the offbeat piano part in the Steve Reich ensemble when we do music for 18, or did. I guess we're doing it again actually in October. But he said he could never play it as an offbeat, so he just switched his mind around so that he felt the offbeats as onbeats, and he played the whole piece hearing offbeats as onbeats. So he heard the whole piece differently than anybody else.
Listen, there are many ways there are many roads to take to get to New York City or whatever. There's not just one way to do it, Sorry, what was your other question? Sorry, interrupted.
Okay, so same thing in Music for 18. And this is more general, but it came up in last week when I was doing it down there. Some people have trouble with rhythm. And they never will get it. Like there was some person that was having trouble, and it was obvious they just weren't tuned in. They had no idea what was happening. They didn't get the piece. They didn't get what they were supposed to do. They couldn't play simple rhythms in time. What do you think that is, that some people just don't have a sense, kind of a rhythmic sense?
I think I try really hard as a teacher to, like this happens at SOSI sometimes where you're like, oh
Yeah,
my,
yeah.
oh, okay. You
Oh, it
haven't,
happens with percussionists. I've had it many times with
yeah.
percussion.
And my first goal is to be like, listen, is just to be honest, be like, hey, you have two things are true at the same time. You have really bad time and you're a great person. Those two things can be intertwined. So like,
Mm.
this is not a value judgment on you as a person at all. Um, I think sometimes people just haven't had the experience, like, like you talked about sitting next to Mr. Abel playing the
Right,
practice pad. It's like, you are just hearing somebody,
right.
if you grow up in a household of somebody speaking Spanish all day, whether or not you're actively being taught how to speak Spanish, you understand the gist. You understand whether somebody's in a good mood or a bad mood, whether, they say the same thing every time they open the door. You're like, oh, hola means hello, and whatever. Adios means goodbye because they say it every time they shut the door. So, okay, you're gleaning things from that just by being in the room. And I think a lot of kids that I come across,
Mm.
because of whatever school they're in, whatever the approach is to collaborating with composers. I mean, I find it often kids will get in a room and they'll just stare at a composer like there's some, troll that's been living under a bridge their whole life. I'm like, this is a person, you can talk to them. And I think as it pertains to time, I think a lot of people just sometimes aren't around a lot of people with great time. And
Yeah.
I think if what that person may have an awkward moment in that concert and it may feel weird for them, but it is the first time they are getting that taste. And for some people, that can scare people off.
Mm.
And if it scares them off into a direction that changes their life in a good way, and they find something else that they are inherently great at, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, like for me, sitting in, seeing a Trinidadian steel band for the first time when I was in college was like, oh my, I have so
Yeah.
far to go, but I want to just drink this out of a fire hose. Like this is, um, and reminding them that this is a thing. Time is a thing that, like Jason has really great time, and
Yeah.
playing with him is like the feel there is really great. But that's a thing he's practiced a lot. He's worked hard on it. I don't
Yeah.
think like the word genius. I hate that word. That you hear somebody's like, oh, Tony Williams is a genius or whatever. It's like, yeah, Tony Williams spent a lot of time with a hi hat. I'm pretty sure of it. Like it's not like he
Yeah.
woke up being able to do that. Same with Steve Gadd. Like, yeah, he sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Or Steve Reich. Like I was at people talk about Steve being a genius. I'm like, oh, like go to his apartment, because what you'll see there is a Casio keyboard set up with a notepad with a ton of stuff scribbled and crossed out. It's like Steve doesn't just wake up and be like, oh, like here's a new piece. And so I think for somebody who's working on time, be like, here's how you can do this. Like, listen to this, play along with this recording. Just play along with 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. Don't put on a metronome because it doesn't have a feel. Put on Steve Gadd as your metronome, and you'll understand what it's like to play with somebody who's 100% aware of where they're putting every note. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of, that helps a lot. And told you I was reading a lot of stuff about Bill Evans. He says the same thing. He admires people who spent years working on things more than these geniuses or whatever they are that seem to be able to do things instantly. Yeah, I've had the experience in my teaching, especially things like drumming or things with isochronous pulse. The people aren't getting it, and I try everything I can think of, and they're still not getting it. And so finally, I asked them, "Well, why do you think you're not getting it?" And a couple of times, or one in particular, this person said, "Because I don't want to. I'm afraid it's going to mess up my feeling to phrase in other kinds of music or inflect or do these. If I start playing rigidly, what they consider rigidly,
right.
it's going to affect everything else they do, which I think it won't. But
Yeah, I mean, that's trying to convince younger students of the sort of yes, and it's like, yes, there's a way that you might be asked to play in drum corps, and you can think that that's the only way, or you can be like, don't play like you're in a drum corps because that's a bad thing. It's like, well, no, that's a way that works in that instance. That's beautiful. In the instance of playing, Caroline Shaw's music, you need to be able to turn that dial off and turn up another dial. What you want is 75 different dials. You can sort of, in every instance, you're gonna be like, I don't need this one. Actually, I do need this one. Like being able to turn it on and off, knowing whether or not, knowing like what playing in the pocket is, knowing what playing on the back side of the beat is and knowing what playing on the front half of the beat is and all the gradations in between, and still neither slowing down or rushing. Like,
Yeah.
those are things that I think also too, I just try to remind people, like, there's no pill you can take. Like, trust me on this. If you just think about it every day, you'll get a little bit better about it. But, don't get frustrated. Don't get frustrated because you can't get it today. If you have a bad performance of drumming with Russ Hartenberger in the room, like, no one's going to die. Russ hasn't lost anybody yet, as far as I know. Like, and he's not going to go get on the plane and be like, oh my God, that person was awful and they're a bad person. It's like, no, it's your first time doing it. So welcome to the club.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it goes back to your earlier question, about being flexible as a percussionist and being able to adapt, because we have to do that so much. And it's important with time feel to be able to do that too. But yeah, you're right. You really need to live with it. I mean, I really didn't become aware of time feel until I started playing with Xenia, who, I mean, his time was just so impeccable. It was, I mean, there's no arguing with it. Well, I'm sure you felt that with Trinidad players, or with Jason and other people too. It's just so there that you just try to get there as close as you can.
I feel like I'm not hanging on for dear life anymore when I play with So. And in the early stages, I was just like, oh my God, like, I hope I don't fall off the bus. Right now in the drum set world, there's a guy named Jerrion Williams. His nickname is Drummerville, and he is the only person that I currently play with on a semi-regular basis where I am just white knuckling, hoping to God I can play dagat goon ke goon bagat boom on the congas the same way and just keep up. And it is really fun. And I wish folks could understand. I'm fortunate. I'm really fortunate. I get to do a thing that, like, not everybody has the opportunity to do that. And I just happen to be Jerrion's son's godparent, like, and so that's why I get to sit in and play with Jerrion and mess up and be the white guy in the engine room,
Well, I think of you as somebody with really solid time. So I remember, you always play the bass part in a section of drumming, and it's just so there. It's just, but it's one of those things that's so there you're not aware of it. If you know what I mean?
Yeah, I always try to encourage people to be like, be so good you're forgettable. Be so good people don't even realize you're in the room. And then
you have a lot of good little cliche things.
Well, I'm a walking cliche, Russell.
I hope you're doing a lot of teaching, because students need to learn what you have to give.
Well, right? Likewise. And Russ, I've robbed you of an hour and 37 minutes of your time, but I'm really grateful to restart my podcast. I think often I'm thankful to you for helping me get this off the ground again. I know you didn't reach out to me and were like, dude, you got to start your podcast. But the drumming interviews that we did during the pandemic were some of the most, I'm most grateful for, I would say, all of them. Every single one of them was just a joy to get to do. I'm very proud of them. And in this conversation, yes, we did talk about drums and drumming and rhythm and stuff today too, but I really appreciate, I think a lot of folks are going to really breathe a sigh of relief when they hear you sort of talk about the way you think about things, because I think it's terrifying to be a human being sometimes, and just to hear somebody who's been down the road and is still going down. I hope you're in the batter's box swinging for a very, very long time.
Thanks. Well, it's always great. You're right. Your interviews for the drumming website are fantastic, and it's quite valuable to have that. I'm glad that you came up to the plate and did it.
Well, listen, someday I'll be in the batter's box with you, and you'll be like, why are you here so early? I'll be like, well, listen, I like old fashions too much, Russell. That's why.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks a lot.
Hey, tell Bonnie I said hey, and I'll look forward to seeing you in person at some point in the future.
Yeah. Okay, great.
All right. Thanks, Russ.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, thanks for taking the time to listen. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. And Russ is someone I will always look up to and be grateful for having in my life in whatever context is available at the time. Russ is just a sweet person, a great musician, but that's farther down on the list for me. And I hope you all have people like that in your life too. All right, until the next time, we'll talk to you soon. Take care.